Frogs is a 1972 horror film from director George McCowan. The movie opens in where else? The swamp. This is Pickett Smith. He's a photographer taking pictures for an ecology magazine. Kind of ironic that they're filming a photographer out of focus. Oh, it's Samuel Z. Arkoff, of course. Need I remind you of Arkoff's formula? Considering this is a movie about killer frogs, those last two had me worried. Smith takes some photos of animals in the stock footage library. Just then, crap. The frogs are at it again. Or, for the first time. Pretty sure this is the first killer frog movie. Still a better idea than Selfie Man. Smith continues taking pictures of the swamp creatures. This makes it seem like the snake's name is Clint and he's being played by Adam Rourke. After rowing around for a while, he finally finds what he's looking for. Garbage. Somewhere, this gentleman is crying. PBR and Coke in a swamp? Well, they both are trash. Here's your problem. The locals are just dumping their sewage right into the swamp. After several hours of trash photos and intro credits, Smith makes his way out of the swamp where they're dumping even more sewage. Speaking of garbage, out on the lake is siblings Clint and Karen Crockett. Woo! Being rich and irresponsible is awesome! Smith somehow doesn't hear the boat speeding towards him, so Clint drunk speedboats him. Karen is mildly annoyed. They swing back to make sure he's okay.
Oh, am I glad you're not hurt. Those canoes aren't very stable. It was just one of those things!
It's fun to live life without consequence. They tow Smith's canoe back to the house and promise to give him some dry clothes. The head of the household, Jason Crockett, isn't too happy. He sends his brother Stuart to investigate. Meanwhile, the frogs are angry. Clint and Karen try to get Smith to stay and play some games.
Hey, look, I just want to dry out a little bit, then I'll be on my way.
Well, you better forget it, pal. You're fresh blood for our fun and games.
This sounds like the beginning of the most dangerous game. Since Smith is devilishly handsome, Karen does her best to convince him to stay. I've never seen a bathing suit made out of long johns before. This whole movie is going to be intercut with menacing frog footage, isn't it? After stopping at Menethil Harbor, they pass through the wetlands. How did Jason see the boat through all this fog? The gang meets up with Stuart and explains what happened. They tell him Smith is going to stay with them for lunch. Hey, it's one of them cement ponds! Karen introduces Smith to her grandfather and her cousin Michael. They seem nice. Mr. Crockett's annoyed at Smith taking pictures of the island. Michael, on the other hand, wants to know about frogs.
Taking any pictures of frogs lately? I saw the biggest bullfrog this morning. This big.
There frogs out there this big? Mr. Crockett sent his assistant Grover out to investigate the abundance of frogs. Frogs isn't as much fun to say as bees.
But are you saying you want to use these killer bees now? Just to get more honey?
Karen takes Smith inside the house to get some dry clothes, and when did she get flip-flops? So they made her walk through the swamp barefoot, but don't you dare go inside this mansion without shoes! Smith tries to make a phone call, but the frogs cut the phone lines. Karen introduces Smith to Clint's wife, Jenny. She introduces him to the rest of her family.
Not quite awake yet, Mr. Pickett, but I can hardly wait to see what you look like.
What? Clint catches Smith checking out his football jersey and trophies.
That picture, that's Jenny when she was a cheerleader.
Pretty girl.
Yeah, I'd say she was, too.
I'm surprised his wife didn't walk in saying, "What do you mean, was?" Clint's bragging about his high school days.
I'm the same weight now I was when I was playing. Not one extra pound.
The seagulls are not happy about the frogs. Kat is taking some pictures of Bella in an outfit she borrowed from Tony Manero. They finally meet for lunch, and one of the kids has brought a frog.
Hey, what the hey?
The family discusses how much they hate the frogs, and Stuart suggests a way to get rid of them.
How do we get rid of them?
I have suggested pouring oils on the water to choke them off.
Brilliant idea. Ruin the entire ecosystem because you don't like the noise. Mr. Crockett, for all his faults, seems to be the only one who thinks that they're spoiled brats and they should just deal with it.
Make my home smell like a refinery.
Well, I can't sleep.
It's not the end of the world, Jenny.
He asks Smith to investigate the surrounding area and look for Grover. Okay, now they're just repeating frog footage. He finds a bunch of dead stuff and a can of poison. Looks like Grover got a little overzealous on the pest killing. Somehow, I don't think the animal rights people are too happy with this movie. Smith finds Grover dead. Well, I guess he won't mind if I take his Jeep. That night, Clint's drunk and trying to dance with Bella. Jenny's annoyed at Bella's plunging boob dress, so she goes outside to yell at frogs. Mr. Crockett, once again, gets it.
You make it sound like the worst of the ugly rich.
We are the ugly rich.
Smith returns to Frog Central. He tells Mr. Crockett that Grover's dead.
I did everything with him I could.
Yeah, I poked him with a stick and everything. Jason explains that tomorrow is the 4th of July, and every year they have a tradition to celebrate a bunch of birthdays at the house. Just then, the frogs are trying to break the perimeter. Smith hears screaming from the other room, and... Jason then shoots the snake. I'd say dinner is most likely ruined.
Well, what's everybody standing around for? Let's eat.
I guess not. Smith is talking to Jason. He suggests that nature may be retaliating.
Frogs attacking windows, snakes and chandeliers.
Those are two of my favorite alt-rock bands. Jenny's complaining to Clint.
Yes, sir. No, sir. All day long. The only one that matters is him.
Someone doesn't like that she's no longer the center of attention. The next day, the kids don't want to wait until night to light off the fireworks, so they sneak off into the woods to do it early. It's a 70s movie. The frogs might actually eat these kids. Karen informs Smith she almost gave him a booty call.
Nearly came by your room last night.
Why didn't you?
Clint's drunk and taunting his brother Michael. I hope the frogs don't get alcohol poisoning when they eat him. I think Bella borrowed her outfit from Carmen Miranda, and that may be the oldest reference I've ever made. Michael goes out to find the broken phone line. Smith heads back into the woods. He doesn't seem to be too worried about this rattlesnake. Well, no wonder! They defanged it. Michael shoots some birds for no reason. No wonder the swamp hates this family. He trips and shoots himself in the leg. I think a shotgun at point-blank range would do a lot more than that. Tarantulas, uh-oh! Just then, the crew starts throwing rubber spiders at him. Is this supposed to be webbing? The spiders pile on Michael until he dies, and then a scorpion shows up for good measure. Spider webbing. Nature's Ziploc bag. The frogs are getting restless. Kermit, no! Karen's aunt is in the woods hunting butterflies. Kenneth's in the greenhouse, and the lizard's plan springs into action. This guy is super excited to be in a movie. They take the precariously placed bottles of poison and knock them all over. I don't know much about gardening, but why would anyone keep multiple bottles of poison on hand? Kenneth, of course, doesn't find the door and chokes to death. The lizards all seem to be unaffected by this.
Hey, look at what I can do!
I'm starting to think the frogs are just the commanders of the swamp army. Mr. Crockett has had it.
Clint, keep your wife quiet.
Grandfather, something terrible is happening.
You be quiet.
Smith and Bella find Kenneth's body. Mr. Crockett seems most upset that now they have to cancel their plans for croquet. Smith gathers up the men to do something. This is all Ice Froggy Frog's fault.
Oh my God, look at this mess. Got frogs jumping all over my lawn.
Iris runs into a bunch of snakes. She trips and falls over so hard she almost knocks over the camera. Snakes and now leeches? Oh, she's done for. She falls over again, but this time a rattlesnake is waiting for her. She then turns into a Dawn of the Dead zombie. Stuart's being hunted by an alligator. It chases him into the swamp, where another gator is waiting for him. Thank goodness this one has his mouth taped shut. It proceeds to kill him anyway. Karen wants to go get help, but Mr. Crockett refuses because it'll interrupt his plans. Why don't they just leave? He's an old guy in a wheelchair. How is he going to stop them? Okay then. Charles, Maybelle, and Bella fight back, so Mr. Crockett tells Clint to take them off the island. Clint takes them back to the harbor, which is covered in frogs, lizards, and other things. The frogs then make the birds go crazy, so the group takes shelter. Back at the house, Crockett has his priorities in order.
What would you like?
I'd like the menu that was originally planned, starting with a double old-fashioned for me.
Right.
He needs booze. Smith tells them he needs to get ready for the Frog Wars. The lizards ate the rope, so the boat goes adrift. Clint goes in to get it, but the snakes get him. Jenny somehow sees this and goes in the water, only to be slowly attacked by a turtle. Mr. Crockett then points out that this movie is kinda silly.
The frogs are thinking now, the snails are planning strategy, their brains are as good as ours. Is that your point?
The kids see their parents are dead, so they go to tell their grandfather they're leaving. Only he's being an idiot.
Go on, get the hell out of here.
Okay then, bye! Smith grabs a shotgun and leaves Mr. Crockett to die stubbornly. The group heads to the dock. Oh no, Jenny's got crabs! They take Smith's canoe to get away, but get snagged. So Smith takes off his shirt and fights a bunch of snakes. They get free and shoot an alligator. Okay, great. Give the kids the shotgun. They make it back to the bait shop. They check the house, but everyone's dead. Smith flags down a car and asks them for a ride into town. She sees him brandishing a shotgun, but still lets him in? They're driving to town and, oh no, the kid has a frog! Is this the prequel to Battletoads? Back at the house, the frog invasion continues. The frogs get into the house and jump all over him until, you guessed it, he croaks. The movie was shot mostly on location in Florida. After the overwhelming success of Willard in 1971, Frogs and many other Animals Attack films were greenlit. The house where they filmed most of their production was the Wesley House, which dates all the way back to the late 1800s. It's located in Eden's Garden State Park in Santa Rosa Beach, Florida. They filmed many of the swamp scenes in the park. They brought in over 600 frogs and toads for the production. The shoot was fun, but also miserable at times. The cast and crew had to deal with all sorts of bugs and swamp monsters. It was also really hot. Adam Rourke played Clint. He was known for doing mostly biker films like Hell's Angels on Wheels, The Savage Seven, and Hell's Bells, so playing a spoiled rich jock was a departure for him. Classic actor Ray Milland played the grandfather, Mr. Crockett. He's been in over 170 productions since the 1920s. Joan Van Ark's father was a huge fan of Milland, so she took the role for him. This was also her first film. A very young Sam Elliott played Pickett Smith. He'd been acting since the 60s in shows like The Felony Squad, and this was his first leading role. Since the film was low budget, the cast did most of their own stunts. For example, Rourke was the one speeding around carelessly in the boat. They originally shot a scene where Iris gets lured into quicksand and drowns. The director didn't like it, so they reshot her dying from a snake bite. A shot of her in the quicksand still made it into the press material. There was a rumor that Milland was so miserable during the production, he left early, and they had to massively change his death scene. What we see in the film was mostly done with a stunt double. Frogs is such a bizarre film. With the cover, you'd think it's going to be giant frogs eating people, but really it's about frogs controlling the rest of the swamp creatures to either kill the humans, or to make them do something stupid so they die by accident. It reminds me a little of Long Weekend, where the animals had finally had enough and revolt against the humans. Although this was on a much bigger scale. It was so weird to see Sam Elliott without a beard or gray hair. First time I saw this, I didn't recognize him. The movie implies that the animal revolution is taking place in more than just Crockett's Island. I wonder how the frogs are masterminding that in places like Alaska or Nevada. Maybe their revolt is limited to the subtropical. Or maybe I'm just overthinking this. Although Mr. Crockett's dog never turns on him, so he gets all the good boy points for being loyal. The movie's also about 30% recycled frog footage. There's a few frog shots they repeat at least 5 times. Frogs are creepy, and part of me believes the theory that they're really aliens. Or maybe that's just what Hypnotoad wants me to believe.
Grandfather, something terrible is happening.
You be quiet.